Applaud, my friends, the comedy is over. As we celebrate the 250th anniversary of Beethoven's birth this year, he obviously also died at some point. And that was at the end of March in 1827 with these famous last words. Or were they? And what about the strike of thunder on which Beethoven raised his arm for the very last time? Find it out in episode 12 of Beethoven 250 in 52 posts, Beethoven's death. In 1827, Beethoven's health had been declining for a few years already, and his love for alcohol hadn't really helped him. At the end of 1826, his friends understood that the situation became so severe that this was going to be it. He falls ill after a terrible journey from Gneixendorf back to Vienna, and it takes 3 days to find a good doctor for Beethoven. Dr. Wawruch. Beethoven wasn't fond of doctors in general, and especially not of a strange one, but his friend Karl Holz persuaded Beethoven to be treated by Wawruch. For several reasons, the other doctors were not available. And in response, Beethoven writes a small piece for Karl Holz with the title "We Are All Mistaking," his very last and probably his shortest composition. Beethoven suffered from chronic liver disease. His face was all yellow, he had to throw up all the time, and his belly was painfully swollen. And that couldn't be cured. The medical interventions to relieve the pain were only temporary, and by the way, they were terrible. So the only solution they found was to try to ease the suffering. And they did so by allowing Beethoven to drink wine, much to his delight, and a little bit too much perhaps. Besides his medical treatment, practical things have to be arranged, and Beethoven signs his will, about which we will talk in another episode. But on March 24th, 1827, the priest shows up at Beethoven's bed to deliver the last rites. Now, Beethoven's religious thoughts and feelings are not clearly defined, but his biographer Anton Schindler writes that it was Beethoven's wish to show the world that he left it as a sincere Christian. Adding sarcastically to it, "Applaud, my friends, the comedy is over." But those are not his very last words, because a few hours later a box of Rüdesheimer wine arrives and Schindler puts 2 bottles on the table. Beethoven looks at it and says, "Pity, pity, too late," after which he falls in a coma that night. March 26, 1827 would be the last day of Beethoven's life. He'd been unconscious for 2 days already, and at first there's a group of people with him, including his brother Johann, his biographer Anton Schindler, and his friend Stefan Breuning, and an unknown woman, as they're always unknown in Beethoven stories. But at some point, musician Anselm Hüttenbrenner arrives together with a befriended artist, and the artist starts drawing Beethoven on his deathbed, much to the irritation of the others who ask him to leave. The other people have to leave as well because they go to the Währing cemetery to select a grave. So it is Hüttenbrenner, not a very close friend of Beethoven, who is there together with an unknown woman at the very moment of Beethoven's death. And it's a very Beethoven-esque scene. There came a flash of lightning accompanied by a violent clap of thunder which illuminated the death chamber. After this unexpected phenomenon of nature, Beethoven opened his eyes, lifted his right hand and looked up for several seconds with his fist clenched and a very serious, threatening expression. When he let the raised hand sink to the bed, his eyes closed halfway. Not another breath, not a heartbeat more. At Beethoven's funeral service in Vienna 3 days later, this trombone piece was played. 10 to 30,000 people lined the streets for the procession, and at the doors of the cemetery, these beautiful words are spoken. The last master of resounding song, the gracious mouth by which music spoke, the man who inherited and increased the immortal fame of Handel and Bach, of Haydn and Mozart, has ceased to be. And we stand weeping over the broken strings of an instrument now stilled. Beautiful words, but at the same time the start of many, many new stories. Because in the years after, Beethoven's remains wouldn't sit still, especially his hair. Learn more in the next episode of Beethoven 250 in 52 posts. If you enjoyed this video, like and share it with your friends and subscribe to my media channels to miss nothing. See you next week.